Biggest week of the year. Let's do this. It is Hot Sheet on the Baseball America YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Scotty Braun, JJ Cooper, Carlos Collazo, everyone looking pretty well rested and in decent shape for now. You can always tell by the eyelids. That really kind of helps to tell the story, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so I know we're excited about some of the coverage that we're going to have with Baseball America and with Foul Territory. So tomorrow on the BA YouTube channel, we'll have a special edition of Hot Sheet. Yes, a bonus show, a roundtable with some of baseball's brightest draft minds. Carlos will be back with us along with Keith Law from The Athletic, and Carlos will also be joined by Shooter Hunt from Prep Baseball Report. I'll be swinging around as host to just distribute the rock to the superstars. And then Friday, JJ, you and I will be hosting the Prospect Pad with Eric Kratz and some of the top prospects in the sport, 4 o'clock Eastern time, live in Arlington, talking to the Futures Game Stars. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I've always been a Prospect Pad fan, and we'll get to some of the top prospects this time too.
Absolutely. It's going to be a blast doing that. It flies by every year, and you think back on it, it's like, how many All-Stars are we looking on this All-Star roster who were coming through Prospect Pad just a couple of years ago? Ellie De La Cruz, I feel like, was there, a week and a half ago, and here he is, one of the stars of the game now.
And lastly, we'll have a very special draft coverage show on Sunday night that will feature JJ, myself, AJ Przynski, Eric Kratz, special guests joining us throughout the evening. And that will begin at 7 o'clock Eastern time, along with the start time of the draft. And you can check that out on the YouTube channel for Foul Territory. BA will have all the coverage all over socials. Of course, please subscribe to Baseball America's website. This is the time. And lastly, that show will also be on national television on Bally Sports TV. So we're excited about that. All right. Want to get all of that info out there for you. And now we can make our first move. Draft update. Okay, so I know there was a staff draft and also just in general wondering, Carlos, where we are at with days to spare. The next weekend will be draft weekend. Have we learned anything new since last week? And we can mix in how that staff draft went and kind of explain to people how it goes, because it's not a mock draft.
Yeah. So it's not a mock. It's a little bit different in terms of where we're at. I really don't think much has changed. I'm hopeful that as the draft gets closer, as the days get a little bit closer before the draft, we'll get some news. But really, like there's not a lot that can happen now to give real information. So it's just a case of if teams start to get a better feel for what teams around them are doing, maybe things can shore up. But I think really we're talking about the same top of the class that we've talked about over the last few weeks. With the staff draft specifically, JJ actually had the first pick in that, and how that differs from a mock draft is we're not trying to project exactly how the first round is going to pan out on draft day. We are basically putting ourselves in the foolish role of running a scouting department and picking players as if we were picking for teams. JJ picked first. He took Charlie Condon. The first 3 players are kind of chalk on our board. 1, 2, 3, Condon, Bazana, Weatherholt. Those are the top 3 players on our board. It looks like the BA staff is a little bit more excited with the college pitchers than maybe the college first baseman, Nick Kurtz and Jack Caglione, just missing out on the top 5. So that's kind of our first 6 picks. You can tell us maybe which of those you're most excited about, who you think had the best pick in that range. But I mean, it's hard to fault JJ with Charlie Condon there. That's kind of the no-brainer, obvious one for me, and he is at the top of our BA board right now.
I mean, why would you? You could go different ways. You absolutely can. I'm going to go with the NCAA Division I batting champ, NCAA Division I home run champ. I believe second in NCAA on base percentage this year. And I don't want to make it sound like it's just a stat thing, because it's not. It's that he does that. He hits for average. He hits for power. He shows the ability to hit for contact, ability to hit for power, great chase rate, massive EVs. We all have the worries, the bats, the ball, whatever it is. NCAA college baseball's offense is, at record levels, but that's true for everyone. And hey, I'm going to go with the guy who has a 2-year track record also. I think it often gets forgotten with Condon that we are talking about our BA freshman of the year last year as well. This is the dude who's done it consistently for 2 years.
Carlos, I'll also just ask you here, what's the biggest surprise from the top? I mean, maybe I'm biased because, I sit next to AJ Przynski most days and I hear about Jack Caggs all the time from UF.
Yeah.
But I know he'd be kind of pissed if he didn't see him in the top 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think this has kind of been a consistent theme for us, like the staff at Baseball America. We seem to all be a little bit lower on Jack Caglione than the industry. Again, I think if you're looking at our mock draft versus our staff draft, Jack might have the most consistent, like largest delta between the staff draft and the mock drafts. I think all of us are just a little bit more scared of the combination of the chase risk that he has. There's more chase. I mean, I took Nick Kurtz. You saw there at number 6. Um, I was deciding between both the college first baseman. I don't think college first base profiles in general have been super exciting in the top 10 over the last 15 or so years. But for me, it's really just more comfort in thinking that Nick Kurtz is a more polished hitter, even though I am admittedly passing up some of the raw power upside potential that a guy like Caglione gives you. And I am curious whether or not the industry has kind of a polarizing view on Caglione as a whole, but it certainly seems like the teams in the top 5 are all really excited about him. And I would be surprised if he did fall out of the top 5 on draft day at this point.
Carlos, I'll go right back to you to dip down into the later portion of the first round. I know there are many fans that are lucky to have teams that didn't have to go through the draft lottery or even the system where you get booted out of the draft lottery, which we'll get into a lot at some point too. But, if you're a fan of one of the better teams in baseball and you're picking towards the end of the first round, what stands out to you?
Yeah, well, what stands out to me about this draft is I think it can go in a whole bunch of different directions once we get outside of this top 10. So even before the 20s, things can get chaotic. The separation of these players is razor thin. I think there's a tier of like 30 to 40 players that all make sense in this range. For me, I think there are a lot of exciting high school players in this 20s range. The high school class has been critiqued pretty consistently throughout the spring, but there have been some players who have moved up boards. Pitchers like Ryan Sloan, Cash Mayfield. If you want power, a guy like Ryan Sloan has a chance for 3+ pitches. Cash Mayfield is a left-handed pitcher who's old for the class, but he also might have one of the better deliveries, college or high school. He just has a buttery smooth delivery. Theo Gillen is a Texas high school shortstop. Might slide to second base or play outfield in the future, but he has a really exciting hit power combination. So once we get into the 20s and kind of the run on college hitters as kind of passed us by, I think there are really exciting high school players that teams can dream on. I'm always a fan of high school profiles in general, just because you can get a lot more excited about them. They haven't been nitpicked quite as much as the college players. You can really project, get excited about the tools, the athleticism, and some teams find stars with high school players. It, in general, maybe is a more risky demographic, but I think sometimes the reward is worth that risk.
Let's get to our first fan question today. It's Trey coming in with a question on Kayleen Culpepper. Where do you think he could land, Carlos?
Kalen Culpepper, Kansas State shortstop. He played third base last year. One of the separators for Culpepper is he actually has a decent chance to play shortstop in this class. And if you look around, there are not a lot of solid, confident shortstop profiles to be found. I think his range probably starts at the earliest somewhere in the 15 to 20 range. More than likely, I could see him going in the back third of the first round, kind of this 20s range we were just talking about. I know Baltimore seems to be a team specifically that has been linked to him, whether or not that's with their first pick or with their supplemental first round pick. I would imagine that spot is a little bit more likely, but I do know they're a team that's been linked to him specifically. And again, if you want a shortstop, your options are pretty limited this year. He did have a good year. He's not the most impactful physical guy, but he's athletic. He has twitchy hands. He's got great arm strength and good defensive actions as well.
Hey, JJ, I want to get to you on the big picture topic of the draft lottery. We've had this question come our way on Foul Territory too, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to save it for Baseball America Hot Sheet. So your thoughts on how the draft lottery has impacted teams both positively, negatively, and also start here. Do you like it?
I think it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Is it the best way to ensure that teams don't tank as much? I don't know about that. But I do think it absolutely has completely changed the dynamic where you know now. You not only know that you don't have a guarantee that having 2, 3, 4 bad years in a row is going to allow you to rack up a ton of top picks. You know it won't, because we've seen it this year. The Nationals, if you pay into revenue sharing, you only get one top 6 pick in a row. Nationals would have been the number 1 pick this year, but they had a lottery pick last year. Revenue sharing payor, you can't have back-to-back. We know that the A's won't have a top 6 pick next year. Back-to-back years, they've been the top 6. The tough thing about that is maybe 6 is something where the difference between picking 1 and 6 is pretty dramatic, and the penalty's the same, right? If the A's haven't had a number 1 pick, but they have had the reality that they're not going to have a lottery pick next year from it. Maybe that could be tweaked a little bit, but I do think it's doing what it's designed to do, which is to say there's not really any kind of benefit of winning 55 games versus winning, 72 nowadays, where there was, because you look at it now and the two teams we have picking at the top here, Guardians are going to the playoffs and the Reds might go to the playoffs. This is kind of a very unique, a very different thing we're seeing now than what we've seen, where you must be, clear the bar of losing more than 100, 110 games to be the number one pick.
Yeah, the fact that we have a team with the Guardians who had a 2% chance to win the first overall pick, and then the Reds picking right behind them, who I think had a less than 1% chance for the number one pick, just makes the draft more compelling to me. I do think that the draft lottery will help disincentivize tanking and intentionally being bad to get better. The fact that you could intentionally be bad at the major league level for years, and that was a strategy that works, I don't think is a good thing. I don't really know if I like the fact that the revenue sharing comes into play for the top six back-to-back years. I think like the A's and the White Sox, both of them should be able to be in the lottery for the same amount of years. I know the teams that like to cry poor always want these sort of additions, and the fact that the White Sox are a bigger market than Oakland means they're penalized more for it. I think they should both be the same either way. But I do like the fact that like the White Sox this year in the old format, they'd kind of be running away with the number one pick next year. That's not the case. They actually would have been better last year if they had missed the lottery and picked at like 7 or 8, and then we're back in the lottery for the 25 draft, which looks like it might be better, and you might have a shot at like an Ethan Holiday 1-1. So the fact that it panned out like that for them is just kind of interesting. But I hope that it does prevent like the tear down tank method from happening, because I just don't think that's good for fans of the game.
Nailed it too on that last part, Carlos, and then we'll bring in this fan question here right now. The cry poor thing, I think, is more of the negotiation that occurs so that owners stay on the same page. Even though I agree, I think it's a ridiculous thing to have in the lottery system here. But I think there's a lot of politics that goes on behind the scenes. Like, we'll agree to other things, but we want to continue to get this advantage. So anyway, let's get to Luke. Yeah, let's get to Luke. He has a question on a team that likes to operate towards the bottom of the barrel in terms of their spending at times. Rays have some good, interesting arms in their system, but maybe not a blue chip arm. Do you see them as a possibility for Brody Brecht?
Yeah, I don't think I've heard this one specifically, but I really like this player team connection, because Brody Brecht's big thing is he just doesn't throw a lot of strikes. I think the Rays would maybe be the first team that you point to. There might be a couple others that you can put in the same category, but they really do a great job of just getting their pitchers over the strike zone more consistently. When you talk to them about it, it makes it seem super simple, but it's definitely not that easy to figure that out for pitchers. I mean, Brecht has, I think, outside of Chase Burns and Hagen Smith, Brecht has probably the best pure stuff in this class. It's supreme arm talent. It's an elite athlete. He sits around 96, 97 with the fastball. He's got a devastating slider that's gotten double plus grades. He's worked on a split changeup. He's worked on multiple shapes with the slider. But really for him, it's just put the ball over the plate. Hitters are going to get themselves out if he can put the stuff over the plate. He's really struggled to do that all 3 years at Iowa. I think it is worth noting that he has improved slightly each season. So he's made progress, and he's also gotten further away from being a two-way or a two-sport player focusing on football. Over the last year, he's just focused on pitching, but there's still a lot of room for improvement with his control. And yeah, I think the Rays would be a great fit for him just from a player development perspective. I'd be really excited to see how they could get him over the plate more frequently.
The one thing I want to quibble with on that question is we just finished updating at Baseball America. We have updated top 30s and updated top 100 for, but updated top 30s for all 30 teams with scouting reports, tools, grades, all that. And I do think the Rays actually take a close look at Gary Gil-Hill, who's kind of been their pop-up pitching prospect this year. He just moved on to our top 100, the very back of the top 100 for us, right now. But this is a guy who came into the year kind of far off the top prospect radar, but he's really taken big steps forward. This is something that we've seen the Rays do before. Very young pitcher, still in low A, but has gained 3, 4, almost 5 miles an hour to his velocity, moved his arm slot back up, and he's really emerged. He's far away. I don't want to make it sound like he's going to be in the big leagues next year, but it is a very good success story for the Rays this year, a pitching prospect who's made big strides and kind of put himself in that top tier of Rays pitching prospects now.
Carlos, I got one more thing for you before you jump. Another big picture question, which could include, a specific answer on a player, but just thoughts on, the prep prospects at the top of the draft and where you've seen teams, make decisions on that front in terms of a trust factor.
Yeah, so for the top guys this year, Connor Griffin and Bryce Rayner, I mean, most people expect them to go inside the top 10. They're kind of right at the back of that top 10 range, so there's a chance they could slide out depending on what happens. It really will be interesting kind of how the money comes into play, how teams' philosophies come into play. The Nationals are a team that has really taken a lot of risks on tools, the athletic, powerful profiles in the past. They've got some new people in their scouting department that have come over from Baltimore. Does that change kind of the profiles they target? But in general, I think Connor Griffin, Bryce Rayner will be our first two high schoolers off the board. After that, maybe a little bit of a gap, and then it can get really interesting kind of in that late teens, early 20s range. But yeah, the high school class this year is super odd. We don't have a Max Clark, we don't have a Walker Jenkins, but I actually do think the depth of pitching specifically and kind of the second, third round range, there's a lot of talent there, and I'll be really curious to see how teams tackle it and if they're willing to sign those profiles they typically shy away from.
And we're covering all of this, but everything you need is in the draft guide. So I just want to throw that out there. BA's draft guide is available now. It is the primer for the draft order, slot value system, past draft strategy, the whole deal, right? You can click on that link to that recent tweet, or obviously head over to baseballamerica.com and go get yourself a subscription, and you can get everything you need to know on the draft. And yes, we will continue to bring coverage on the YouTube channel as well, which includes tomorrow's show. Friday's show is more prospect heavy, but we might mix in some draft combos. And then Sunday, we cover the draft on the YouTube channel. Carlos, thank you very much, and we will see you in 24 hours.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Thank you. And let's bring in Geoff Pontes right now to join JJ and myself. We'll get into some prospect chatting as well. So, Geoff, we're going to do some pretty heavy Q&A as well. You fill me in here. So, we've got some good questions in the chat, which we can get to at some point, but you also have some kind of leftover questions from the hot sheet chat as well. Are these ones that you didn't get to?
No, some of them I've already answered actually, and we still have it open. I'll jump back in there and answer another 10 or 15 questions we have left. Actually, if people want to hit the link on I tweeted out from Twitter, feel free to, or X, excuse me. Feel free to jump in there and still submit some more questions. I'll be in front of my computer chatting for the rest of the day. So happy to do that. I don't have as much time to, do my hair as Carlos does. I want to apologize for my downgrade and follicle carrying tools here. I don't have the same motor as Carlos,
Yeah, but you have, just as good of a wardrobe right now. I mean, he had the FT shirt. You've got the BA quarter zip, so it's going strong. Or is that the full zip? Quarter or full? I can't.
No, this is the quarter zip. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I only rock with the quarters, man.
I like it. Okay, actually, let's go to a fan question in the YouTube chat right now from Wesley. He said, how much are NIL deals affecting whether a high school player will sign? JJ, do you want to start with this?
Sure. It absolutely changes the calculation. At the top of the draft, it doesn't, right? If you're going to get millions of dollars, you almost 100% of the time. I say almost, because there is a Jack Leiter guy like that who's a first round talent who says, no, I'm going to school. But most of the time, it's hard to make that money up, right? Because if you're a first round, especially top of the first round talent, you're talking 5, 6, 7 million. You can go to school, you can get your degree, but they do cover your scholarship. If you go to pro ball, you are going to get your education covered if you want. But when you get to that next tier, that's where I think this really does affect things. If you're a day 2, especially if you're a day 3 guy, and it's like, hey, we're going to offer you $500K, we're going to offer you $750K. Well, now this is where the calculation changes. Now, when it comes to how much do guys make in NIL, like everything feels like, you're talking to your buddy who went fishing and the fish just keeps getting bigger and you don't know how true, not like, okay, did you make $1 million? Did you make 500,000? Did you make 10,000? But we know that there is NIL money out there to be made. And the thing it changes is, so let's just say that you're making 75K a year in NIL. Well, the calculations changes is you're making money while you're going to school. And let's be honest, a lot of times the college experience is a more enjoyable one than the low minors. And then you also have the opportunity, if you do perform, to move up in the draft. So you're not just risking 500,000. Let's say you're trading off 500,000 for 200,000 in a scholarship now, 150,000 scholarship now, but maybe you turn that $500,000 bonus into $1 million or $1.5 million a couple years later in the draft. Well, then you see the dynamics like, hey, you could kind of lower your risk of how much money you're risking by going to school. And also at the same time, maybe even make more money, because if you're a day 2, day 3 talent, and then you turn yourself into a day 1 talent by going to school, you're going to make more money on both ends then.
Yeah, and I think, you hit on a point there just in terms of like what the numbers are like. And I feel like you hear these numbers that are thrown around. None of it truly gets reported, but it's more back channel sort of sourced information that we get. And the numbers like never really sort of made sense. Like you're not seeing $1 million or 500,000 probably outside of like the rare 1 or 2 guys that can hit those numbers, particularly in baseball. I mean, we're talking football, basketball, some of those, female sports where they also have really big social media presences. I think the numbers and the economics are very different. But yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt day 1 or day 2, probably even at some of those day 3 guys that maybe would have signed for $250,000 to $300,000. They now have an opportunity to, go to school, make some money in NIL, even if. And honestly, the question now is, even if you're at a smaller school you're committed to, where you're going to play as a freshman, you now have an opportunity to really raise your profile if you have a great freshman year with a mid-major and can end up in an SEC school for 2 years. We saw it with a potential first rounder coming up this weekend, Ryan Waldschmidt. We've seen it with others as well. I think you could probably even throw Paul Skeens out there as sort of a similar one. And those guys can make some money in NIL when they get to an SEC school because they are a big fish in the transfer portal. That's where a lot of that money is getting bandied about and thrown around. And then they can raise their profile and maybe make some more money on draft day. And if they're not in that first, round or 2 conversation, or someone like a Ryan Clifford who's going to get $1 million bonus in round 11, if you're not one of those guys, it makes a lot of sense to go to school, and maybe your earning potential actually increases.
So I want to get to one question from the hot sheet chat. We'll hit the international prospect scene. Of course, now he's in a system. Leo DeVries has been, covered at length for, being the biggest signing in the last international class. And with the Padres, he's in that system right now. The question is he living up to the first season expectations so far? Is high A out of the question this year for him? And I'll just kind of add to that, because as a more, whatever you want to call it, MLB observer, I'm always looking at the Padres and wondering, is this a guy they're going to circle and keep? Or is this a guy that they might dangle for a potential package for a big player at the trade deadline, knowing how AJ Preller operates? So, JJ, what do you think?
You stole my answer, Scott, because when say is high A possibility, well, my answer was going to be depends. Is he traded in the next month? And I'd say no. I would say in any other system, he's not going to high A this year. But if he stays a Padre, if he's a Padre, in August, well, look at what they did with Ethan Salas last year, who started in low A, moved to high A, then moved to double A. So I don't think it's in any way out of a question if he remains a Padre. And the only reason we have to bring that up is that, yeah, AJ and the Padres, AJ Preller and the Padres are more aggressive at the trade deadline than pretty much anyone. They're clearly in it this year. And when you look at who are the players that they can trade, everyone can always make deals at the deadline. I want to emphasize that time and time again. But if you want to play with the, if you want to be shopping in the high end segment of the trade market, you need to have top end talent, top end prospects. And to be honest, the Padres have a number of guys who really haven't had great years, who look like they probably are those top prospects for them. Kind of makes what DeVries, maybe a little bit more a possibility for that. To answer the question on how is he doing, slow start, which is to be expected. He was way younger than pretty much everyone else in that league. But we have seen lately he seems to be catching up to speed of the league, maybe even has caught up to the speed of the league. And I'm very interested to see what his second half looks like, because we have seen some really positive signs in the last couple of weeks. Speaking of, I think he was a hot sheet guy just recently. Speaking of hot sheet.
He was hot sheet this week, actually. He had, a big game last week, the multi-home run game. Things like, I feel like things are trending in the right direction. It's a really aggressive assignment. He skipped 2 levels of the complex. I mean, we got to be clear on that. Just signed, no Dominican Summer League, no Arizona Complex League. and then goes right to low A. And I think, he didn't really get a C legs for a couple of weeks. He finally got those. If you look at the underlying numbers, they're pretty good. He's walking, I think, 12.5% of the time, which is a really good number to see. The strikeouts aren't, outrageous. 25%, considering his age and his experience level as a professional, I don't think is bad. I think when I looked this morning, the WRC plus was like 103, 104. So it's right around league average. I think when you factor in age and the expectations and everything else, I think he's rounding into form, and it's a good place. If I was the Padres, I don't think you need to shove this guy up to high A. We've kind of seen it come back a little bit from what it was last year with a guy like Ethan Salas. I think, there's something to be said. He jumped 2 levels of the minors. Let this guy settle in, let him dominate a little bit. He's still so young that even if he hits high A at the beginning of the season next year, there's no shame in that at all.
Yeah, take your time with the teenagers here and there. It's okay. Not everybody has to be rushing up. We have actually seen that storyline play out quite a bit this year, where rookies have struggled maybe a little bit more than some expected, and we've covered that quite a bit on this show. Okay, let's spend the last few minutes on the fresh top 100. JJ, how much thought went into James Wood cracking the list at number 1 this time?
A lot, a ton, because we take it very seriously. Every spot, we agonize over every spot in the rankings, but you agonize even more over who's number 1. And when we started, I would say our default is okay, Paul Skeens has graduated, Jackson Holliday moves to number 1, but then we stopped and talked through. And we talked it through for probably 20, 30 minutes after having had other discussions. And Jeff was one of the ones who kind of, I'll say, helped drive us to the James Wood answer, because at the end of the day, and this is nothing against Jackson Holliday, but when you say all of the things that make Jackson Holliday the number 1 prospect, they're kind of there for Wood as well. When you talk about, well, Jackson Holliday's really young and he's in the upper level of the minors. Well, James Wood is only 1 year older and he's in the majors now. Jackson Holliday has a really good plate discipline. Well, James Wood does too. And James Wood has shown this year the ability to kind of make adjustments. He's kind of, every time he has a weakness, he figures out a way to improvement. And Jeff, the thing that jumps out about it, then when you get a little further is, and then if you say top end upside, well, we're projecting a lot on Jackson Holliday's power to develop. You're not really projecting James Wood power. You just know that James Wood has power at this moment, right?
Yeah, you don't have to project any power with James Wood. I mean, because just jumping to the major leagues, he's probably already well within the top 5 to 10 percentile just in terms of raw exit velocities and power. And I don't think that's going to decrease anytime as he gets into his prime years in his mid-20s. He's a super athlete. He's a better athlete than Jackson Holliday is. I think, the thing that's caught up is just his hitting against left-handed pitching has really increased this year. The contact overall was really increased. He always made really good swing decisions and sort of has, long enough levers that he can hit stuff on the outside. And something that I know that you've kind of harped on when we've talked about Wood is, for a guy with bigger levers, he doesn't struggle to handle pitches on the inside. He can turn on that stuff. He can power it out. He can use the entire field. It's a really good hit tool. And, he's a great runner, a plus runner easily. One of those guys plus, in terms of, sprint speed and that sort of thing, home to first times maybe are more like plus. But I think all the tools are there. There's no real questions about what James Wood can do. And we've seen that his landing with in the major leagues has been a lot smoother than Holliday's. And I think some of that is just the impact and the physical. He's built like a big leaguer. I mean, the guy looks like he could be a small forward for the Lakers tomorrow,
Yeah, that's a good call. I like that. You said they need him for a different show, but I like it. So congrats to James Wood. He's number 1 while that lasts until his prospect status sheds away. And we could show this. I mean, we're going to say goodbye in a sec, but you've got about 70% of this year's All-Stars previously listed on the Baseball America Top 100 list. So I know you threw that out there for a little percentage, and you can click into it.
Take the relievers out of it. 80% of position players. Relievers we have a tough time with, but I'm not going to beat myself up too much on the fact that we don't have a ton of relievers going to the All-Star game in our top 100.
Yeah, and that's fair. There's a reason why for that. You should know. If you don't, we don't have time right now, but you should understand. Okay, I want to let everyone know yet again that our coverage is going to continue here on Baseball America. Extensive coverage this week of the draft as we lead up to it, and the futures game, really kind of giving you a preview and a look at the life of some of the top prospects in the sport if you tune into Friday's show at 4 o'clock Eastern time. But before that, 3 o'clock East Coast time, roundtable on Wednesday. Carlos from the VA side will be here for it. So thanks to everyone for watching this hot sheet, and another one coming at you very soon. Get some rest, my friends. We will talk in 24 hours.